that student. In tonight's reality check, Local 15 News investigates the revolving door at Mobile County schools.
And many students who would previously be suspended and rushed off to detention centers will now stay put in your child's classroom. It's all part of a new suspension policy.
Local 15's Jasmine Williams tells us why this new plan is not sitting well with some parents.
Think of the new plan as mandatory sentencing. There are now guidelines in place to keep kids in school and find other ways of discipline instead of sending them home. But in the midst of the change has risen a new debate. Are there too many suspensions, or are kids getting off easy?
I got my guard dogs in there.
So maybe it's not the most aggressive bark. Between her two dogs and this gate, Sandra Wilson has several eyes, ears, and paws protecting her home. It's the same watchful eye she wanted in her children's classroom. Wanted yet worried about the school her kids were zoned to attend.
Because I felt that Blunt wasn't as safe or wasn't getting the education they need at the time.
So at the time, instead of attending Blunt High School, Wilson received permission to transfer her children to Mary G. Montgomery. Troubled kids throughout the system, she says, were the reason behind her move to what she felt was a safer school. Many of those troubled teens wind up at Strickland Youth Center. According to Mobile's juvenile court judge Edmund Naiman, a lot of repeat offenders now were also repeat offenders in the school system.
The average child that I have in my court that comes on a regular basis is doing very poorly in school, and frequently when we do a background check on them, they've been suspended 6, 10, as many as 12 times in their academic career.
Simply putting kids out of school, Naiman says, doesn't solve the problem. The judge sees about 100 students a day. Many of them, nearly 30%, he says, will end up in the youth center again. His experience shows suspensions, expulsions, and even arrests don't stop the revolving door. Such a school of thought led leaders at the U.S. Department of Education and Justice to set new federal guidelines outlining alternative ways to handle bad behavior. You may be surprised to learn there's been a shift in how to deal with the so-called misbehaving kids. Zero tolerance policies are now a thing of the past.
Something, again, that's new this year, but it's worked very well for them.
The new policy was put to the test in Mobile County schools this past year. As a result, Terrence Mixon with Student Services says students are no longer suspended for what he calls low-level offenses like disruptions and cursing. That means now some misbehaving kids will remain in the classroom.
We don't just default to suspension. We try to have conferences with the students, conferences with the parents, try to find other alternatives like detention after school or some kind of community service project. We've cut suspensions probably in half for the 2013-14 school year.
It's almost impossible for a young person that already is not doing very well in school then to go on and graduate if he's been suspended that many times.
For Judge Naiman, the change is about ending the release and rearrest cycle in the detention centers and being tolerant of the at times disruptive children instead of closing the door and kicking them out of school. But for Sandra Wilson, there's a lot of uncertainty when it comes to the more open door approach.
I just don't think it's safe to do that, to keep putting them back into the system.
Here locally, some of the changes to Mobile County school policy come after a lawsuit settlement filed by the Southern Poverty Law Center. In that settlement, students can no longer be suspended for minor infractions such as uniform violations or being late to class. Guys, back to you.
All right, Jasmine, thanks. Local 15 News is your advocate in the community.
If you know of any wrongdoing, scams, or abuse of your tax money, call our Reality Check hotline, 877-315-7268. Well, City Leaders